champion Emmanuel Lasker famously stated, "The hardest game to win is the one game." We can all relate to letting a great game slip out of our hands, and it even happens to the greatest chess players from time to time. In this position, Lasker himself proves how hard it can be to win a one game. White is down an incredible amount of material, but notice that Lasker's pawn on h7 is ready to promote into a queen on the next move. There doesn't seem to be any way black can stop the promotion when the new queen gives all the winning chances to white. When you are in a winning position, it is easy to relax, get happy, and think that any move will win. This is exactly what you need to avoid to win the one game. You need to stay alert and look out for tactical chances until the very end of the game. In this position, Lasker has several ways to escape the rook checks. One idea is to play king f1. In an endgame, you usually don't want to cut your king off from the rest of the action, but here white is keeping the position as simple as possible to eliminate any tactical chances for the opponent. Black has only one sensible check, with rook c1 check. And after king e2, rook c2 check, white can put an end to the rook checks with king d3, sacrificing one pawn, but after rook takes g2 and h8 equals queen, white's queen now takes over the game, attacking black's king, and will start collecting pawns. Black may have chances to draw with careful play, but now white is the only side playing for a win. Let's see what Lasker decided to play in the game. Lasker thought he could end black's counterplay and win quickly after king g3, rook c3 check. Lasker can still repeat the position with king f2 and then try another course, but Lasker played king g4, because after rook c4 check and king g5, white's king appears safe from any tactics, but it's important to remember that as you march your king closer to your opponent's forces, you always have to stay alert for tactical chances against your king. Lasker may have expected black to resign, but believe it or not, it will soon be Lasker's turn to resign. Can you find black's incredible move that wins the game? If you found rook h4, fantastic job. Black threatens to capture the h7 pawn, white's only hope to win the game, and after king takes h4, white's king is forced to the unfortunate h4 square, allowing black to open up the g7 square for the king with g5 check. White's king is forced to deal with the check when after king takes g5, black's king catches white's dangerous passed pawn with king g7. After defending against white's threat of promotion, black's connected passed pawns on the queen side will win the game for black. This was a pretty complicated example, but it shows us how many chances there are in a chess game and how easy it is to throw away a great position. Let's take a look at some more examples and learn how to win the one game. In this position, the material imbalance is between white's 2 rooks and 3 extra pawns versus black's 3 minor pieces, which is definitely better for white. Notice black's king is only protected by pieces, not pawns, so black's king safety is also not great. With white to move, how do we win the one game? One very tempting move is queen h6, threatening checkmate on the next turn. If black tries to block the g-file with a bishop or a knight on g6, white can trade one of the rooks for 2 minor pieces, simplifying the position to white's favor. If black tries to protect the bishop with queen f8, white can simply win the knight with rook takes e5, taking advantage of the pinned bishop on g7. Everything looks great after queen h6, but notice we have only been looking at black's defensive moves. Always remember to look for your opponent's active, forcing moves, as overlooking these moves can cause serious problems. Black has the very interesting option of knight f3 check. The knight checks white's king and discovers the black queen's attack on the rook on g3. Since capturing with the rook would unpin black's bishop and allow black to win white's queen, white should play g takes f3. Black sacrificed the knight in order to play the surprising move queen takes g3 check, capturing the rook with check and unpinning the bishop on g7. White captures the queen with h takes g3. Capturing with the h-pawn keeps the king sheltered against the 2 bishops. After bishop takes h6 and rook takes e7, white's position is still winning, but black's 2 bishops may cause problems for white, so black still has some hope. In winning positions, we want to simplify our task as much as possible. Let's see if we can find an easier way to win this game. We mentioned the importance of looking for forcing moves your opponent can play, but don't forget to look at your own forcing moves as well. Can you find a forcing move for white that can simplify the position? In the game, white played rook takes g7 check. And after king takes g7, notice black's king is lined up on the same diagonal as the knight on e5. After queen d4, white is threatening queen takes e5, entering a simplified ending when white's rook and extra pawns should have no problems against black's bishop. If black tries to defend the knight with king f6, white can add more pressure to the pinned knight with f4. White is ready to play queen takes e5, trading queens, or if black moves the queen away first, black's exposed king will not survive long. White avoided unnecessary complications and soon won the game by trading down into a rook and several extra pawns versus bishop endgame. Let's take a look at one more example together. In this position, we join a tournament game that I was playing with the black pieces. Black is on the attack, and it looks like white's king is in serious trouble. If rook h1 check, white is forced to capture the pawn on g2, but it wasn't clear to me what to do next. I thought about bishop f3 to protect the g2 pawn first, but then I am simply dropping a bishop to the knight. Unfortunately, I didn't ask myself the follow-up question: what if I remove the knight first? Can you find the winning move that I missed? If you found the queen sacrifice queen takes e5, great job. By removing the knight that was protecting the f3 square, black not only is up a piece for the moment, but has an overwhelming attack. If white captures the queen with rook takes e5, after bishop f3, white's king is trapped, and rook h1 checkmate is unstoppable. I completely missed the winning queen sacrifice and simply played rook d to g8, preparing to play bishop f3 to threaten rook h1 checkmate. As expected, white played f3, attacking my bishop and opening up an escape square for the king on f2. I already missed one winning move, and now my opponent is starting to fight back. Here it is all too easy to start reacting to your opponent's play, and I almost retreated my bishop to f5. One of the keys to winning the one game is staying alert and keeping your pieces as active as possible. Why can't black capture the pawn on f3? Yes, the knight protects the square, but what happens then? After bishop takes f3, I saw through my opponent's aggression and realized there is nothing to fear. My opponent did not capture the bishop, but white's unprotected king did not survive long. If white played knight takes f3, let's practice winning the one game. After black plays rook h1 check and king f2, do you see a clear win? Before beginning to calculate these complications, stay on the surface. Is there a simpler move that prevents the white king from escaping to f2? That's right. Black can play queen g3. Now rook h1 checkmate is unstoppable. Now that you've learned the skills necessary to bring home the victory, can you win the one game? Let's see. Is chess a science, sport, or an art? Or is it something completely different? There are many different answers depending on who you ask. The second world chess champion, Emanuel Lasker, called chess the human struggle. Chess is a clash of ideas between two players. Not only do you have to struggle against your opponent, you also have to face yourself. Chess is a very logical game, but it is also psychological, as we must learn how to deal with the roller coaster of emotions we can experience during a chess game. The joy of finding a tactical combination, the disappointment of throwing away a completely winning position, and the thrill of attacking the opponent's king are just a few of these emotions. Today we're going to look at one of my own games and explore the inner game of chess, chess psychology. In this game, I have the white pieces. I am 17 years old with a rating of 1791. My opponent was rated 2394 and was the top competitor in this National Scholastic Championship. Playing a higher rated opponent can be very intimidating. I remember feeling nervous before the game started. How can I possibly compete against such a strong player, I wondered. I did my best to focus on the game and take it one move at a time. Easier said than done. My 600-point higher rated opponent playing the black pieces, is on the move. He played knight to b6, gaining a tempo against my bishop. I have an isolated queen pawn, so if he can control the square in front of the pawn, in this case d5, and begin to trade pieces, my isolated queen pawn will become more of a weakness. After bishop d3 and knight fd5, black's knight blockades my isolated pawn, preventing it from advancing, and also opening up an attack against my dark squared bishop. Since my bishop doesn't have a great square to retreat, I traded bishops with bishop takes e7 and queen takes e7. Black has traded a pair of minor pieces, one step closer to his goal of entering an endgame where I am stuck with a weak, isolated pawn. One strength of the isolated pawn in the middle game is since it does not have a pawn able to protect it on the files next to it, in this case the c and the e files. These files can be used by the rooks and queen. After rook e1, my rook enjoys the semi-open e file and x-rays black's queen. Now black can play a normal move such as bishop d7, preparing to anchor a knight on d5 with bishop c6. The game may continue slowly, where white will have some chances of building an attack on the king side, but black will have a solid game. One of the biggest challenges to remember when playing a much higher rated opponent is that the higher rated opponent often feels great pressure to defeat you. Instead of focusing on your own emotions, fearing the rating of your opponent, remember that they also have to deal with their own psychological pressure. My opponent must have felt this pressure and decided to take a serious risk by playing f5. When I first saw this move, I was completely shocked. My opponent is 600 points higher rated than me, so he must know what he's doing, right? I started to imagine all of his kingside pawns rushing forward with g5 and h5. I felt like I was going to be pushed right off the board. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and decided to look at the position, not my opponent's rating. Although this move looks aggressive, it doesn't threaten anything yet. No matter how strong a move may look, you always have to look for its weaknesses. By playing f5, black's e6 pawn is now backward as it can only be protected by pieces and will be a long-term target. Notice by moving the pawn off f7, the a2 to g8 diagonal has been weakened, and black's king is on that diagonal. After calming my emotions and analyzing the position, I realized this move was a serious weakness, and I played queen b3. My queen is now on the same diagonal as my opponent's king, and more pressure is being added to the d5 knight. If my opponent played a normal-looking move, such as developing a piece with bishop d7, can you see the real threat I created by playing queen b3? White has a powerful combination starting with knight takes d5. Since the e-pawn is pinned to black's queen, after knight takes d5, I was ready to play queen takes d5, winning a piece, since after e takes d5 and rook takes e7, white is up a full piece and is already invading black's territory. Instead of allowing this tactic, my opponent wisely moved his queen off of the dangerous e-file with queen f6. After knight takes d5, black decided not to recapture with the e-pawn, which would create an isolated pawn and open up the e-file for white's rook. Instead, black played knight takes d5. I increased the pressure against black's knight with bishop c4. And after black added another defender to the knight with rook d8, how can white add more pressure against the knight on d5? If you found rook e5, great job. White's rook adds more pressure to black's knight and also prepares to complete development with rook a to e1. Black moved the knight to safety with knight c7, and after rook a to e1, all of white's pieces are already developed, and black is feeling the pressure against the backward e6 pawn. This is why a move like f5 should only be played after very careful thought. Pawns cannot move backwards, and black is stuck defending the weak e6 pawn. Black played rook e8, adding more protection to the weak e6 pawn. My opponent's risky strategy has backfired, and he is in serious trouble. As my position continued to get better and better, I became more and more nervous and fearful. I must be missing something, I thought. Once again, I started to fear my opponent. So I closed my eyes, paused, and forced myself to focus on the position not my opponent's rating. Since the e6 pawn is pinned, I was very tempted to play d5, which turns out to be a very powerful move. But when you have a safe, very strong position, it's a good idea to keep the position simple and clear so your opponent doesn't have a chance to escape in the complications. Black's only active move is b5, trying to break out of his bind. Rather than rushing forward and allowing complications, I took a deep breath, realized there was no hurry, and I prevented my opponent's only chance for counterplay by playing a4. Now that b5 is under control, I was ready to blast open the position with d5. My opponent, in desperation, tried to complicate things by playing b5 anyway. Without having a pawn on a4, my only option to capture the pawn would be with bishop takes b5, when rook b8 would pin my bishop to the queen. I wanted to avoid this, so I played a takes b5. My opponent pinned the pawn to my queen with rook b8, but his scattered army is no match for my fully developed pieces working together. I push forward with d5. Black does not want to capture the pawn and lose material on the e-file, so he played bishop b7. Finally completing development and connecting his rooks, but it is too little too late. After d6, my isolated pawn is now a pass pawn, marching up the board and pushing black's pieces around. After knight d5, the pass pawn advances again with d7, attacking black's rook. If black's rook leaves the e-file, white will crash through with rook takes e6, so black played rook e7. Imagine yourself in my situation. I have outplayed the top player in this national tournament, and I know that I am close to winning the game. This is the most dangerous moment in a chess game, because when you realize you are winning, it is easy to relax and become overconfident. I had to once again close my eyes and allow my emotions to run its course. After taking a deep breath, I reminded myself to focus on the position itself and use the same thought process I used to enter a winning position in order to actually win the game. I calculated a combination where I would sacrifice my queen, knowing that the pass pawn on d7, combined with my powerful rooks and knight, would overwhelm my opponent's position. I started the combination with bishop takes d5. After bishop takes d5, I quickly double-checked my analysis, realized it worked, and with a trembling hand I played the queen sacrifice, queen takes d5. By sacrificing my queen, I open up the e-file for my powerful rooks. After e takes d5 and rook takes e7, my threat is rook e8 check, attacking black's rook and promoting the pass pawn. If my opponent blocked the promotion square with rook d8, I would win the game by playing rook e8 check, king f7, and after knight e5 check, black is forced to give up his queen when white has an overwhelming advantage. My opponent decided to play queen d6, and after rook e8 check, king f7. Can you find a combination that forces black to give up his queen? If you decided to bring your last piece into the attack by playing knight g5 check, great job. Black's king is forced to the same rank as the queen after king f6. White forks the black king and queen with rook 1 to e6 check, and after queen takes e6, knight takes e6. White is now completely winning. Although I had an overwhelming position, I still was afraid that my opponent's rook could somehow deliver a back-rank checkmate. Once again, I focused on the position instead of my emotions and realized I was going to promote my pawn into a queen and easily win the game. My opponent resigned the game, which completed my biggest tournament upset in my chess career. Some important things to remember from this game include that you too can play chess, and all chess players make mistakes. Do not allow fear to overwhelm you. Your opponent also has their own struggles. Remember to take a deep breath and return your focus to the position. Are you ready to overcome your emotions and find good moves? Let's put you to the test.